1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good.
Keep going.
Mic check, mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good. Anybody else?
Well, thank you. Here we are. We have with us signing Holly May and Leisha Martin. Happy to have you here. Chaplain Denny, please.
Thank you, Governor. Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, if y'all remember him, he said, "A little consideration, a little thought for others makes all the difference." So whenever a storm comes or even the storms of life happens, consideration and helping your fellow human makes life a little more bearable and allows for all of us to connect on a human level. So if you would, with that spirit, could you please pray with me if you're a praying person? God, as we plan for the storm ahead, help us to look out for each other, serve one another, and love our neighbors as ourselves. Through adversity comes strength. Help us to use this adversity to grow stronger within our human connections with each other, our communities, and ultimately strengthen the resolve of South Carolina. So, Lord, I also ask that you continue to watch over Florida as they're getting hit right now. Watch over and protect them. And I pray all this in your mighty and precious name, Lord. Amen.
Thank you. John Quirello, National Weather Service.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. E made landfall this past hour as a Category 4 hurricane with wind speeds of 150 miles per hour just southwest of Punta Gorda, Florida. Ian is still expected to bring various but rather widespread impacts to the state of South Carolina late this week into early this weekend. Of course, we have various threats, including the potential for some heavy rainfall and flash flooding, stronger winds, storm surge along the coast, and even some isolated tornadoes. So as I mentioned, Ian is currently a high-end Category 4 hurricane, wind speeds 150 miles an hour. It's moving to the north-northeast around 10 miles per hour. The current forecast from the National Hurricane Center shows Ian moving northeast across the Florida Peninsula while gradually weakening, and then coming back out into the Atlantic Ocean as a tropical storm, where it's expected to maintain its strength as it tracks toward the South Carolina coast on Friday. Tropical storm warnings are currently in effect for the entire coast of South Carolina, and a hurricane watch is also in effect from Charleston County south. And the reason for that is Ian, while it's out over the Atlantic Ocean, there is the potential for it to strengthen or to be a low-end Category 1 hurricane. So that hurricane watch is to account for that potential intensity track error that we have, the potential uncertainty in the intensity. And just in case it does strengthen a little bit more than currently forecast, the hurricane watch is in effect as a precaution. In addition, the storm surge warnings in effect now as well from Charleston County south through the Georgia state line. So the current weather pattern still is favoring strengthening winds beginning tomorrow and then increasing storm surge as well. And that's all well ahead of Ian's approach. Breezy conditions should occur on Thursday across most of the state. Wind gusts may be as high as 30 to 40 miles an hour at times. The tropical storm force winds themselves, though, aren't expected to arrive until Friday morning, and those tropical storm force winds could continue through Friday night and maybe even into early Saturday. So with that, I think residents should be prepared for some power outages, as these winds could be sufficient to maybe knock down some trees and power lines. So just have a plan in place for that. The strong onshore winds could result in a prolonged period of storm surge inundation along the coast beginning Thursday and continuing into Saturday. So this could result in significant inundation of 3 to 5 feet along the southern and central portions of the coast and 1 to 3 feet for the northern portion of the coast. So what that really means is if you're in an area normally prone to flooding along the coast, a spot that tends to see water fairly often, you should really plan to seek higher ground. Heed the warnings from local officials. Just keep yourself safe from the expected rising water that we'll see Thursday, Friday, and into Saturday. In addition, periods of heavy rainfall are expected to begin late Thursday and continue into early Saturday. We're expecting a widespread 4 to 6 inches across the state, but certainly some areas could see higher amounts, especially toward the coast. I just want to remind everyone that all it takes is just a few inches of rain in a rather short period of time to quickly cause flash flooding. So that's just something to be aware of if you're out driving. Be aware of those low-lying spots and areas more prone to flash flooding as well. And finally, there is a tornado threat along the immediate coast, and that seems to be more late Friday into early Saturday. So an isolated tornado is certainly possible as those bands from Ian move across the area. So once again, as mentioned yesterday, I think it's really important not to focus on the intensity of the storm. It could be a tropical storm, it could be a weaker hurricane, but we really need to focus on the expected impacts across the state. And we do expect higher winds. We expect at least areas to see some flash flooding. We expect to see high water coming in from the ocean, inundating parts of the coast, and some isolated tornadoes. So if you need community-specific information, I recommend going to your local National Weather Service office, visiting the website. A lot of detailed information on there to kind of help make your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Quirelli will be here, of course, to answer more questions if you have any later. What he mentioned in trying to predict as best we can is always very uncertain science. Is this storm or hurricane is going to be stronger than some and weaker than others. And sometimes we get a lot of wind and not much rain. Sometimes we get a lot of rain, not much wind. Sometimes we get a lot of flooding. And so we really don't know exactly what is going to happen, but we do know that a 40-mile-an-hour wind can knock a big truck over and off of a bridge. So it could be that if the winds get that high, we'll have to close some bridges at some time. We know that the water in places, if it usually floods at a very high tide, you're going to see some water this time. Might be 1 foot, might be 2 feet, might be 5 feet. We really don't know. But what the rule is typically is to run from the water and hide from the wind. And so that is the rule here. And the third part of that is to be sure to know where you are, to be prepared. Now is the time to finish getting prepared because these winds are going to be coming. We know that, and we know we're going to get some rain as well. So be prepared, know where your important papers are, know where your medicines are, know where you're going to go if you need to go, know what you're going to do with your pets, alert your family, all of those things. You must always, we're hoping for the best, but we're preparing for the worst. In light of what we know about this storm or hurricane, and we know that it is really hitting Florida hard. I think it's as hard as anything they've seen there in a long time. Fortunately, typically when they go across land, they weaken, but this is going across and is in the ocean, but they're very unpredictable. Some people here may remember when some almost were going in one direction and took a right angle and went in another direction. So they're very unpredictable, so we want to be safe. So I have, at 3 o'clock, I issued a state of emergency, not an evacuation, but a state of emergency, effective at 3 o'clock today when it was filed. And I'm activating the state's emergency operations plan. It is in writing. It's available on the internet. You can look it up. It's got details on who does what, how, and all of those kind of things. And also, this state of emergency is lifting a lot of the regulations and a lot of the rules that allow us to move quickly, to move people, to move assets. And also, the state of emergency allows us to draw down federal FEMA dollars. And I was in touch on Monday with the FEMA administrator, and we are as prepared as we can be for what is coming. Again, I'm not ordering any evacuations. The counties, we've been in touch with the counties constantly. The counties do not believe they need evacuations. I'm ordering no evacuations. I'm ordering no closures of state government offices. I'm ordering no school closures. That is up to the school districts themselves. Today's order does a number of things. The National Guard is activated to begin pre-positioning assets and troops. The order allows agencies to suspend any regulations that may hinder operations during the state of emergency, such as weight limits and hour limits, but not to the extent that it puts anyone in danger. Also, the Department of Transportation can suspend regulations on bridges. This is weight limits on bridges and highways, the hours of operations of truck drivers, all of those sorts of things, fuel requirements, the licensing, labor licensing regulation can change the scope of practice, can lift those regulations. So if we need nurses, so if we need certain types of skills, we don't have to go through a licensing process. These measures, all of them, allow the state to draw down federal funds for these preparation purposes. Now, we went through a lot of this with COVID, and we've been through a lot of it again with the hurricanes and storms that we had before. This is nothing new to people who have lived in this state for a number of years. We've had plenty of hurricanes, plenty of storms, and even some tornadoes. But a lot of the visitors or people who have moved into the state recently may not have seen this. A lot of the young people may not have seen this. This storm can be very, very dangerous. So we ask you once again to get your information from official sources, be informed, be prepared, and be safe. And now, Mr. Stinson.
Good afternoon, Kim Stenson, Director of State Emergency Management Division. The State Emergency Operations Center is going to move today to Operation Condition 2, which is an enhanced level of alert. It includes the activation of the State Emergency Operations Plan, as the Governor's already mentioned. And activation of the plan allows us to coordinate state resources more efficiently and operate under the same emergency management framework that we've operated under during several disasters in the last several years, and it's worked very well. It will also include selected state agency presence at the State Emergency Operations Center. Our priorities right now include support to counties and contingency planning for a number of missions, including transportation, sheltering, supply, and equipment, as well as an active public information operation to keep citizens informed. We continue to have daily conference calls with local emergency managers to share information and identify any unmet needs. And then, as the Governor's already mentioned, South Carolina residents should continue to check their local weather outlets to get updated storm forecasts and double-check their personal emergency plans. And those plans should include such items as ensuring everyone in your family knows what to do in the event of emergency, identify those threats that you might have to take action against, know where to go if conditions become too unsafe to remain in your home. Also, as was mentioned earlier, if you live in a low-lying area or areas normally prone to flooding, make sure your emergency plan includes that. Have an emergency kit with items such as a 3-day supply of bottled water and non-perishable food for each family member, as well as flashlights, extra batteries, and chargers for your mobile devices. Prepare your home or businesses by securing any items that are outdoors to bring them indoors. Certainly prepare for the possibility of power outages, and frequently monitor weather conditions and be aware that tornadoes are likely to develop during a tropical storm. Also, keep your important papers in a water-tight bag, and then finally ensure all your medications are filled. To help with the planning, we encourage all residents to visit our website at scemd.org, which has a wealth of information for individual families and businesses in preparing for emergency situations. Our South Carolina Emergency Manager app is also a great tool, which includes a module that allows citizens to create their own personal plan. And then lastly, another reminder that this is not just a coastal event. We expect this storm to impact all of South Carolina in some way. Thank you.
Nanette Edwards.
Thank you, Governor. Nanette Edwards, Executive Director for the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff. We've been in contact with our utility partners. They are preparing, staging resources so that as the storm moves through, they can safely work to restore power. I do want to remind you that they will only run the crews and the bucket trucks when it is safe to do so, and that means when there are wind speeds higher than 30 miles per hour, they will wait until they start putting their crews out. With regard to fuel, we are in contact with our fuel partners. They are reporting no issues, so we have sufficient fuel supplies. And with that, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Secretary Hall.
Christy Hall with the South Carolina Department of Transportation, the Secretary of Transportation. The DOT, we currently have more than 2,100 employees statewide that are doing preparation work in advance of the storm arriving. Additionally, we are relocating some of those resources to the coastal areas to help with the expected recovery operations that may be required due to downed trees or isolated flooding. As you heard John Q. mentioned, we are expecting the winds to increase in the state on Friday as the storm moves through. And some of those winds, depending on the level and the location of them, may trigger some of the high-level bridge closures in the state for a limited period of time based on judgment of the local law enforcement alongside DOT. Those restrictions generally are for 30 miles per hour of sustained winds. The high-profile vehicles, meaning delivery trucks, transfer trucks, RVs, things of that nature, would be restricted from crossing some of the high-level bridges like the Ravenel Bridge and the 526 Bridge there over the Wando. And then if winds reach 40 miles per hour sustained, then we would look to partner with the local law enforcement entities for potential closure of those structures, but in order to provide, to ensure safety of the motoring public in those areas. So pay attention to official news sources in those regions, plan ahead, just be aware, track what the storm is doing, and plan your routes accordingly if you have to travel at all on Friday as the storm moves through the state. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. Dr. Simmer.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Ed Simmer, Director of the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. The more than 3,000 members of the DHAC team are actively preparing for this storm to ensure we limit the impact on the people of South Carolina as much as we can. We're working with our healthcare facilities, nursing homes, hospitals, and others to make sure they're ready. At this point, we're not planning on evacuating any medical facilities, but we do have staff and resources ready to assist should a facility need that on short notice. I would, however, note that as wind speeds increase, in many areas, emergency medical services may not be able to operate safely for some period of time in the middle of the storm. So please consider that as you're making your plans, that there may be some time when EMS is not able to respond immediately because the wind speeds are too high. Also, please, we strongly recommend you stay out of floodwaters. Floodwaters often have toxic substances. They can be infectious. So if at all possible, stay out of floodwaters because they can be quite dangerous, not just the drowning risk, but also because of what's in them. From the environmental side, we continue to work with our over 2,000 dam owners across the state to make sure that spillways are clear, that when needed, water levels are lowered, of course, working with those downstream when that is done. We've contacted all of our dam owners. All of them should have our contact information, but if you need more, please visit scdhec.gov/dams, D-A-M-S. And finally, we're also working with local communities along the coast so if there is significant beach erosion that imperils homes or other important structures, that we'll be able to respond very quickly after the storm to try to shore those up, replace the sand very quickly so that those buildings can survive. And with that, I will turn things back over to Governor McMaster. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Simmer. Are there any questions for anyone? Mr. Bustos.
Why not, for safety's sake, in case it does become a hurricane, why not do the evacuations?
It's not necessary based on all the information we have. It is an expert opinion and common sense opinion as well that it is not necessary to evacuate. An evacuation entails a lot of disruption, and it's not necessary with this storm. It has been necessary with others. This one doesn't have the wind speed that some others have had, but it's got more wind speed than some have had. And again, they hit different parts of the state. But we think that the analysis that we have made with the National Weather Service and also watching what's happening in Florida indicates this is not a situation where we need to have evacuations, and therefore I will not order one.
Are shelters going to be opened?
There will be some, that was discussed before, but not to the extent that they were earlier.
Thanks, Governor. Mike Leach, South Carolina Department of Social Services. Out of precaution right now, there'll be a couple shelters open up in Charleston County and one tomorrow in Jasper County, and they all are opening between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. We are, you can find more information on scemd.org on that, or you can actually text shelter to and your zip code to 43362. And it'll give you a list of nearest open shelters within 200 miles. But at this point in time, out of precaution, there are 2 or 3 that are opening tomorrow.
Another question.
Governor, have you spoken with Florida Governor DeSantis? Have we offered them any support, any supplies?
We've been in touch with his office. We have not offered to send anything at this point because we are preparing here for whatever may happen. We always hope for the best. We prepare for the worst. Any more questions?
You talked about this yesterday, but the experience that this team has for storms like this, how crucial and important is that, in a moment right now?
It's enormously experienced, and everyone you see here has been through this many times, it seems. We've certainly had our share, and we've had our share of some very high winds, and as well as a lot of water and a lot of flooding, really unprecedented. You remember I think we had 2,000-year floods within just a few years of each other. So this experience and the collaboration and working together among this team is really extraordinary, and we have a great plan. It's in writing. We believe we know what to do. What we want to The main thing is we want the citizens to realize that they must take care. They must know if they're in an area that is forecast to have any problems, they need to know where they're going to go, when they're going to go. Their family members need to go, and all the things that Mr. Stinson said that need to be available, important papers, medicines, things for your pets, all of those sorts of things need to be planned ahead of time, and we do have time now for people to make those arrangements and to make those decisions. Again, we don't think this is going to be as bad as some that we've seen, but we think it's going to be worse than some that we've seen.
Question for John, how does this storm compare to storms in our recent history?
That's an excellent question. I know people like comparisons, and it's often difficult to do that because every storm is different. Some storms in the past that have maybe brought strong winds, the wind impacts might have been right along the coast. In this event, we do think the winds will extend all the way from the coast to well inland, even into the upstate, would see some of those higher winds. The rainfall threat exists across the whole state. So, like the governor was mentioning, we're not expecting the rainfall to be as catastrophic as it was in 2015 for the floods or during Florence or Matthew, but certainly if we get enough heavy rainfall in a short period of time, we would see flash flooding. That's something we should expect and anticipate and be prepared for. In terms of the wind speeds that we're forecasting would certainly be enough to cause some issues in terms of knocking down trees, power lines, maybe some minor damage to homes, siding, and shingles and things like that. But it's not going to be a destructive wind, but it could be an inconvenience and cause people to be without power for a little while. So, like everyone's saying, we work very closely with all of our partners in emergency management and state and county and local governments to pass along the latest information, and they're using that to make the most informed decisions. And so my recommendation is, it's really hard to compare to previous storms, but if you're taking the proper precautions and listening to the advice of local officials, you're probably going to be okay.
Any more questions? Thank you very much.
Of this hurricane that is currently over Florida at this hour. The state of emergency is typical in situations like this. Basically, it allows mutual agreements between state agencies to go into effect. It helps with the preparation of what's headed our way. No evacuations ordered for any areas along the coast. No state offices closing as of right now because of this storm. The governor also not ordering any schools to close, but some schools have already taken it upon themselves to go to online learning for Friday. So the governor, Efren, says he made this decision based on all of this information that the National Weather Service has given him about this storm possibly making landfall somewhere along our coast as maybe a tropical storm or a Cat 1 hurricane.
Yeah, and John Quagliarello with the National Weather Service here in Columbia did indicate that it already made its landfall at winds of 155. It's now down to 145, but still gusting at 190 miles an hour. You can see it's right over downtown Fort Myers. Now, all indications right now is that the trajectory does move it sometime Friday, maybe during the day or into the early evening, off the coast of probably anywhere from Colleton to Dorchester counties, maybe even Charleston County, as possibly a tropical storm. Winds could be in excess of 50 miles an hour and then moves inland into the upstate by Saturday morning with winds at about 35. But the impact points, again, is going to be mostly, as far as the wind, on the right side of the trajectory of where Ian moves. There's going to be a lot of rain still involved in it. Now, regarding the winds, that's why the National Hurricane Center right now does have a tropical storm watch for the low country and a tropical storm warning for the entire South Carolina shores. But there's also a hurricane watch, it's just a watch, for the low country, coastal, and points inland. So you're talking from Williamsburg, or rather from Charleston all the way down to Hampton counties. The one thing that we are going to be watching, though, is for the possibility of the tropical storm winds. At this time right now, the best chance is going to be maybe a little bit over 20% sometime Friday night into the areas in as far as inside the Midlands. There's a slightly better chance, and there's a very slightly better chance in Charleston where they're over 35%. But the bottom line is that as Hurricane Ian continues to move, this is going to be a complex that is going to fade out quickly. Although the winds right now are at 145 and gusting to 190, we know that as it crosses through Florida, and it's going to be on Florida for at least 24 to 36 hours, it will weaken even though it goes offshore and then come back into the South Carolina shorelines of the low country. It should start to dramatically weaken to at least a tropical storm.
And Efren, while I have you there for just a moment, for viewers here in the Midlands, what are we expecting here from this? Just a lot of rain and some pretty gusty winds and isolated tornadoes?
Yeah, and that's the thing about what we're expecting, because even though the track does have it coming through the Midlands and pretty much all of the Midlands, the impacts that we're going to be looking at may not necessarily be the hurricane or even tropical storm winds that the low country is expecting, but the rainfall is definitely going to be the thing that we're going to be experiencing, because we're looking at right now, in fact, let me pull this, we're expecting quite a bit of rainfall. The rainfall amounts, though, are not as extensive as we're expecting on Friday. It's just going to be a chance more in the low country. It's Saturday, so Friday night overnight into Saturday is when we're expecting the bulk of not only the winds being the strongest, maybe gusting to 35 to 40 miles an hour. They are going to be sustained at least 25, but there's going to be a lot of heavy rainfall. And I will say this, after speaking to the National Weather Service earlier today, there is the likelihood we are going to have flash floods in many areas of the Midlands, but in particular, central, east central, southwestern, and southern Midlands. And the two particular areas I'm watching very carefully for is Clarendon and Orangeburg County.
All right, Chief, thank you so much. I know you're going to continue to monitor this. You'll have a complete update for us when you join us on Friends at 5. Right now, let's take a look at the list of schools that have decided to go to online learning. Sumter County schools, they are going to dismiss early tomorrow. You see the hours on your screen there. They're going home at different times tomorrow with their middle schools, their high schools, and their elementary schools. Also, another of other schools in Clarendon County, they're dismissing early. They're going to online learning as well for Friday. You see those on your screen there, MHS Manning High School. Clarendon County schools, Sandy Run, St. Matthews dismissing early again. Again, all of these schools are going to have online learning on Friday. Richland 1, AC Moore, Rosewood Elementary, they're dismissing early tomorrow. Olympia Learning Center, they're going at noon tomorrow. The evening high school program canceled for tomorrow. Hand Middle School going to go home about 12:30 tomorrow. And as we go to Orangeburg County, elementary schools there dismissing early again tomorrow morning. This is going to be with the exception of for Dover Elementary. They dismiss at 12:30. Middle schools, K through 12 schools and middle high schools will dismiss at 12:30. High schools at 1 except for Orangeburg Wilkinson. They're going to leave at 1:30. Again, it is an e-learning day, online learning day for Friday. No early dismissal for Kershaw County schools as of yet. Lexington 1, Lexington 2, Lexington 4, Lexington, Richland 5 schools, Fairfield 2, Richland 2, but Friday will be online learning for those schools. We got all this information. There's so much of it. We've got all of this information for you on our website right now. If you missed any of that, simply go to WLTX.com or the free News 19 mobile app. So again, a state of emergency, but no evacuations along the coast. The governor says they are simply not necessary. Our next update coming up at the top of the hour on Friends at 5. We'll see you then.